The sun is rising upon Detective Tanner's waterfront home, casting a shadow over his backyard pool, itself sitting under a Miami cityscape. As Tanner, you poke around his modern glass design house, wondering how a cop can afford it, while the morning sun casts through. Eventually, you make your way to his garage, revealing his all-American muscle car. Hop in, hear the engine roar and the tires screech as you floor it across a dimly lit Miami to work. There's little traffic, the storm clouds glow above, and you can almost feel the cold air outside heating up. A stunning atmospheric track rings in the background to score the entire scene, helping paint the serene, understated, and beautiful opening moments to one of the most bipolar and clearly unfinished high-profile video game releases of all time. Driv3r was an enormous release. After the first two games, and after developer Reflections Interactive's own Stuntman was received as something of a tech demo and hype piece for Driv3r, and after Grand Theft Auto 3 demanded a response from what was being framed as its leading rival franchise, the video game world was looking on to see how one of the PS1's highest selling series would continue its winning run on the new consoles. And its publisher Atari knew this, with the CEO stating that they had a $17 million marketing budget to match its $17 million development budget. Magazine covers and features were everywhere, ads were on TV and websites and billboards around the world, online previews mounted building up to release, Japan revealed the game with a flipped smashed police car in the back of a truck, and Atari even produced a live-action promotional short film that looks every bit as expensive and explosive as a 3-minute car chase could possibly be. This was one hell of a marketing push. Costs weren't cut on the soundtrack either, featuring both original tracks composed for the game alongside licensed music from the likes of Phantom Planet and Iggy Pop, and they were so happy to market their soundtrack too and even sell it separately, which, according to a post-mortem by the composer, shipped a whopping 250,000 units, a lot for a video game soundtrack. And to make it all the more interesting, Iggy Pop himself narrates the album in between each track, in a real surreal midnight radio style way.
Iggy's presentation is dark, poetic and intriguing. It lifts the soundtrack and integrates themes, story elements and music all into the world of Driver.
The devil is beautiful. That's why he's the devil.
Iggy Pop also voices a minor character in the game, though the marketing would indicate he's one of the stars of the show, alongside the likes of the Reservoir Dogs guy, Marcellus Wallace, Letty from The Fast and the Furious, and Mickey Rourke from Rogue Warrior. It's an amusing all-star Hollywood cast that really helped serve the marketing team as their names were plastered everywhere. They all have cool voices too, which helps.
The best part about doing this stuff is you don't have to shave when you go to work.
Atari's budget flowed into every avenue it could, only serving to heighten the already enormous hype for Driv3r, setting the stage for what felt at the time like one of the biggest video game releases ever. After all, it had to be. Behind the scenes, Atari and Reflections desperately needed this to succeed. A Eurogamer preview written back in 2004 by Kristen Reed outlines this better than I could, and I feel it's worth reading out an excerpt from this old article because it contextualizes what the general feeling was like on the press and consumer end before release. Driv3r is the most important video game launch ever. Never before has an entire company's fate rested so heavily on the release of one product, but Reflections' long overdue sequel is that kind of game, and Atari is doubtlessly slightly peeved that in the last 3 years it has had to watch from the sidelines while Rockstar, Sony, and even Activision have cleaned up in mission-based driving stakes. All that pent-up aggression and realization that we could be doing that has resulted in one of the most concerted marketing campaigns ever attempted for a video game. Reed later continues, "It is, after all, only a game, just one that happens to have a 10 million sales target attached to it. Forget Enter the Matrix's piddling 4 million target, this is the real deal. Make or break time, 10 million or over $1 million in the UK alone." Now that target number seems to change depending on which article you read, but it's always well into the millions, and the point still stands that Driv3r was shaping up to be Atari's Hail Mary. As a reference point, GTA 3 had reached about 7 million sales in the 3 years between its and Driv3r's release. Reed goes on to state that he could almost feel the glare of the Atari executives over his shoulder while he was playing the preview. Calling the various companies that have formed under the Atari name tumultuous is underselling it. They were messy at the best of times, and the 2000s were not the best of times for Atari. Massive debt, acquiring and selling IPs and game studios, and signing business deals ad nauseum, and generally failing to make games that ever really made a splash. Yet still, they endeavored to sink money into Driv3r, knowing the fanfare behind it. The suits seem to have hoped that Driv3r, a game that replaces an E with a 3, would fix all their problems and propel their version of Atari to new heights. As I'm sure you can guess, that isn't quite what happened. Rushed out the door in June of 2004 after some delays, Driv3r wasn't a total flop, reportedly selling at least 3 million copies, but it fell far below its astronomical expectations, critics were widely unimpressed, and Atari delved headfirst into their mid-2000s slump. But the actual game that came out of all of this is incredibly fascinating. Part of why that is because Driv3r came to life through the perfect storm of massive ambition meeting a massive budget.
If you're not good enough, you're gonna wish you were him.
Now, reviews will tell you that Driv3r has good driving mechanics, terrible on-foot mechanics, and it all feels very buggy and unfinished. Thanks for watching, please support me on Patreon. The feel of the driving itself is truly fantastic, as you'd come to expect. Being built on top of Stuntman's code, slingshotting drifts around tight bends and fighting your way back into control is every bit as satisfying and endlessly enjoyable as it's ever been. You can feel the weight of the car transferring onto each wheel, the tires losing and regaining grip, and it's tuned so precisely that you never feel fully in control nor fully out of control. Every corner you take tells its own story as you ride the line, sliding your way around to perfection or slamming headfirst into oncoming traffic. Conversely, the on-foot stuff is every bit as bad as its reputation would suggest. Unwieldy aiming input, whether it's bad mouse acceleration or with a controller, the clunkiest and most pathetic jump, crouch, and forward roll you'll ever do in a third-person shooter. The AI barely has any eye, the animation is robotic, the movement is sticky and takes way too long to reach running speed, and most amusingly, if you run on a 45-degree angle, you run way faster than you would just running straight ahead. It's frankly a disaster, and it's the main roadblock stopping you from enjoying the game. Driv3r 1 and 2 were difficult. They're tough as nails driving games where even if you drive perfectly, you'll still be fighting against the clock with milliseconds to spare. Driv3r is also super hard, but it doesn't use countdown timers nearly as much, so it's not hard in the same way. Most missions are driving missions, and it's more about keeping up with whoever you're chasing, or trying not to get totaled by whoever's chasing you, or trying not to get killed by gunfire, or just generally trying not to crash your car. Because this uses basically the same physics engine as Stuntman, there's no artificial video gamey forces that keep your car on all four wheels. It adheres entirely to a realistic for the time-ish physics model. Like, if you crash and start rolling, you might end up on your roof, and that's game over. If you take a jump, which you'll do a lot of, make sure you're hitting the ramp at the perfect angle and the perfect speed, because if you're even a fraction off, that's game over. I personally love the thrill and demand from it, but you can see why someone wouldn't. Couple all this with the clunkiest, most unfinished shootouts ever that also aren't always easy, and a gluttony of ever-present visual bugs and pop-in, and you can easily conclude why the game sits at around a 50 on Metacritic, and why it felt like it came, went, and faded away. To many, despite some fun driving physics and impressive tech, Driv3r is nothing more than a frustrating mess. Now, before we get any deeper, which oh goody we will, let's take a break to chat about Movies. Driver 1 and 2 were Hollywood love letters after all. The Driver, Bullet, The French Connection all clearly influenced the early Driver games and their 60s, 70s car chase style. Driver 3 does continue the reverence for Hollywood, also including an improved replay editor that I used to spend all day in making movies, but rather than looking into the past, Driver 3 instead sets its sights on contemporary action films of the time. There's two main movies that Driver 3 draws from. The first movie is John Frankenheimer's 1998 crime thriller Ronin, and watching this movie after playing Driver 3 was a real trip. Like, the second half of Driver 3 is basically this movie, at least aesthetically. There's a shootout in Ronin that looks almost exactly like one in Driver 3. Much of Ronin is set in Nice, one of Driver 3's 3 cities, and there's a car chase in the film through Nice's tight shopping streets that feels very Driver 3, or Driver 3 feels very Ronin. It all feels very Driver 3, like tonally, visually, even the sound effects and soundtrack of Ronin all bleed through to Driver 3. Ronin is most well known for having a fantastic car chase scene through Paris. It's tense, it's weighty, it's grounded, there's lots of weaving through traffic, and it features everyday commuter vehicles, all things that Driver 3 strives to do as well. And in my opinion, it's one of the best chase scenes ever put to film, just as an aside, like, you should go watch it, and it's in what itself is a pretty spectacular action movie. I could dive deeper into how Driver 3 mirrors Ronin's sensibilities, but it shares a lot of sensibilities with the other film Driver 3 draws most from, so let's dive into that instead, the far more renowned 1995 Michael Mann crime epic, Heat, the one that has that famous De Niro-Pacino diner scene. They must have been big De Niro fans over at Reflections. Those of you who are familiar with this movie have probably picked up on its stylings in Driver 3. The opening cutscene in Driver 3 has almost a one-to-one replica of a famous shot from Heat, which itself was mirroring a famous old 60s painting named Pacific by an artist named Alex Colville. Heat's aesthetic stylings can be felt throughout. The glowing night cityscapes, the dark interior shots, the sun-scorched outdoor action scenes, the clinically serious dialogue, the cops vs robbers, the adherence to everyday urban locations, the contemporary architecture, the cat and mouse game between the questionably wealthy strong-willed cop, Tanner or Pacino, and the equally strong-willed bad guy in Jericho or De Niro, who are in a fight that draws them further and further in at their own cost. A lot of, let's call them Michael mannerisms, can be felt in Driver 3 as they both balance that hyper-real masculine coolness against a slightly dreamlike late-night atmosphere. Both are committed to this aesthetic with full conviction. And as someone who adores Michael Mann's mannerisms, I am put into a trance by Driver 3 at times as I absorb the music, the colors, the skylines, and the atmosphere of it all. Take this hotel rooftop scene from early on in the game. If you're focused purely on the surface game design and mechanics, it might make you want to pull your hair out, and there's no excusing that, but I'll just let it play for a few seconds here, and I want you to try and focus on how it looks and sounds, focus on the lighting and the surroundings, and focus on what it's trying to be. It's easy to be repulsed by how bad the game is, but if you can stomach it, it's oozing with atmosphere underneath. The nighttime glow of it all, the colors flowing into each other, the sky hanging above, the sounds of gunshots against this blaring, intense, industrial-esque track. If you forget it's a bad game for a second, it's quite striking, and when the game is actually good, and by that I basically mean when you're in a car and all its aesthetic chops are firing in the same way, it can be truly stunning. Then the game will turn around and slip in the jankiest, most genuinely awful moments ever. It only happens occasionally, but there's some disastrous parts of this game. Like, there's basically two notable on-foot boss battles in the game, and they're both so ridiculous. Everyone I've ever spoken to that's beat them has beat them in the same way, standing behind a bit of cover and shooting them through a wall or through the floor. And of course, the AI doesn't figure out how to solve this dilemma. If Driv3r had higher highs and lower lows than the first game, Driv3r only widens that gap to the extreme. It's a matter of how much you can put up with the bad stuff and how much you love the good stuff. I once heard Michael Mann described as the last true modernist director, which sounds a bit pompous considering modernism usually points to a very defined historical movement that definitely wasn't still a thing in the 90s. There's also a thing called late modernism, and academics will argue about what that is all day, but without diving too heavily into it, you can connect a lot of dots from Michael Mann's work with that of modernist traditions. And I know this is a YouTube video about a broken PS2 game with bad reviews, but stay with me here. At one point in my life, I found myself in a massive rabbit hole overanalyzing Heat and Mann's following movies like Miami Vice and Black Hat and how they're modernist movies. You really can go granular and start arguing that any and every part of those movies exhibit modernist characteristics, but let's not do that. Let's keep it at a high level. So one high level characteristic of modernism and modernist art is a break from tradition, a rejection of the past, and an embracing of the current, of what's modern. And Mann's love for things like urban settings, everyday locations, digital cameras, contemporary architecture, and trending licensed music reflects this. Miami Vice 2006 opens with a Linkin Park Jay-Z mashup. According to Driv3r's making of special feature, which is narrated by Michael Madsen, who probably did more work narrating this than he did actually voicing Tanner in the game, Reflections tried to pick licensed songs by artists that were about to break out. None of them really did, but the result of their efforts is an eclectic mix of mid-2000s tracks that fit the mood of the game remarkably well, and when they claim they spent a lot of time meticulously picking them, you believe it. It was also constantly stressed pre-release that Driv3r was a new experience. New. It rejects Driv3r 1 and 2's old Hollywood throwback energy. These characters use laptops and mobile phones, Nokias to be specific. They drink energy drinks, Sobe or Sobe or however you say it. I know. The game's main menu resembles a DVD's main menu. The map resembles a GPS. Airports, hotels, police stations, shopping centers, cafes, yachts, car parks, beaches, Tanner's own house, they're all either very everyday or modern locations for 2004, not to mention the cars themselves, also ranging from sedans to muscle and supercars. Couple all this alongside the modern action crime thriller Hollywood stylings and the music, and Driv3r really zeroes in on being contemporary. It's so clearly focused on reflecting trends and a corner of cinema, so it shares that cohesive modernist feel Michael Mann's films do. Another characteristic of modernism is that its pioneers earnestly and genuinely thought they were objectively improving upon whatever they were making. Whether it was art or literature or politics, they were always making the best new thing. Picasso earnestly thought he was objectively driving art forward with Cubism. The rise of Marxism and Impressionism and all the isms that came from the modern era were all trying to be the best, biggest new thing, and I can't believe I found myself talking about this in a video about a game that literally has a hole in its map. But this concept can and has been applied to Heat, with how it casted stars in what feels like every possible role, something Driv3r and Ronin also did, and it indulged in enormous high-budget scenes, and it brought an extreme attention to detail and an extreme ambition and scope. It really tried to be the last word for crime movies. It earnestly aimed to be the best. It aimed to innovate, and there's a sense that Mann genuinely believed he was progressing the entire genre as a whole. With how Heat's impact has been felt since, maybe it did. Like Heat, Driv3r didn't necessarily aim to do everything well. I've got a theory that Driv3r aimed to be the objective best at everything it tried. It clearly wasn't, that's obvious, but spin the wheel on any aspect of Driv3r and watch this theory come true. The three cities in Driv3r are insanely detailed for the time. The marketing will tell you that they sent over teams of researchers who walked thousands of miles and took thousands of photos across Miami, Nice, and Istanbul, and artists spent years modeling 35,768 individual buildings and over 70,000 individual items to clutter the streets with. And I know I sound like a press release just bathing in the big numbers that I'm sure they're fluffing to some extent, but the end result of all this effort can actually be felt because these cities are magnificent, ignoring all the Zed fighting and pop-in, of course. There's an internet friend of mine named VortexStory who specializes in Driv3r content on YouTube, and he's helped me out so much with these videos over the years, so please go subscribe to him. And he has this video series called Secret Landmarks where he spotlights different real-life locations in the game, and it is simply amazing. So much was made and it's all so missable because the game doesn't focus on it. It's all simply backdrop. The three cities are huge, they each have their own set of vehicles, each area in each city feels distinct, and moseying around in the free roam mode just taking it all in is still a delight to this day, so you can imagine what it was like in 04. It's amazing just how much there is that you can completely miss, and Driv3r continues to throw in fantastic secret areas, with a go-kart track being a particular highlight. These cities tried to be, and I think succeeded in being, the most high detail, broadest in scope video game cities of their time, which partly explains all the glitching and pop-in, and lines up with my theory. Hey, so I'm interjecting with a really late janky edit, but there's a couple more things I wanted to mention that the cities do that I think are really interesting. One is all the interiors don't have loading screens. You might have noticed that you can just sort of walk into interiors by opening doors and walking in this game, which wasn't always the case in 2004. I know that Getaway did it a couple of years earlier, but it's still quite an impressive feat for the time, so that's sort of another thing that works in the city's favor. And another thing that's been uncovered is that on an artist's website that worked on Driv3r, they showed off all these animations for animals that were meant to be sort of running around and roaming the streets in Driv3r. So another way Driv3r tried to be the best at cities is by having animals everywhere. And that didn't end up making the final release, but again, they tried. So it's interesting, and it's interesting to see these animations here. So yeah, continuing, cool, bye. Spin the wheel again, we have the cutscenes. Fully mocapped, all-star cast, wonderfully weaved in licensed songs, and just in terms of technical prowess, they aren't that far off the Final Fantasies of the time. Maybe they're not quite there, but again, they tried. And I love how they flow and feel. They're directed in such a stylish and inventive way. The crossfades of the Miami nightscape at the start, or the cutscene rewinding to show different perspectives of a scene towards the end, or the introduction of Jericho, or the introduction of Istanbul is just real chef's kiss stuff. I wish I could play them for you, but YouTube Content ID will eat me, so I'll link some good ones in the description. They're worth watching. I haven't yet delved into Driv3r's actual story, and I don't actually plan to. It's about a car cartel theft ring thing. The tale itself is enjoyable enough, if a bit dry. I do enjoy Tanner subtly getting more and more unhinged over the course of the game, but it's less about the story and more about the look and feel. It's the vibe, man. It's Ving Rhames sounding cool, introducing characters a half dozen times in narration. It's Tanner cornering and shooting Iggy Pop's character in an alleyway. It's looking up at Mickey Rourke's Jericho in first person, taking your gun away from you after he punched you out. It's the trance Driv3r puts you in. Spin the wheel again. The game engine. Cool. Obviously, there's the car physics, which I think are virtually unmatched in open world crime games. Like, I'd much rather drive these cars than any GTA or Saints Row or Watch Dogs or whatever that usually treat driving as more of a means to an end than something actually enjoyable. But then there's stuff like the stencil shadows on everything interacting properly with the environment, and the enormous draw distance, terrible pop-in aside, and the lighting effects, whether it's lens flares or the glowing lights at night, and the particle effects and the physics objects. The game basks in using physics objects everywhere, and you don't always just glide through them like they're nothing. Like, crash into a heavier object and you'll bounce off it like you should. Also, I love how they opted to bake in the lighting for 4 different times of day: dawn, day, dusk, and night, rather than try a day-night cycle. The lighting and shadows across each city look unmatched for 2004 as a result. Not to mention what I think are still some of the best car damage models in an open world game almost 20 years later. The way you can beat up each small part of these cars is amazing. Windows break, bumpers warp, doors fly off, tires pop. Driv3r set a bar so high that it still probably sits top 5 in the genre. Coupled with the physics stuff and the particle effects, crashing and blowing up cars in this game is a delight. You feel the impact of every crash. Plenty of the pre-release interviews with Driv3r's creative director talk about the strive for realism, and you can see how that manifests. Spin the wheel again, the on-foot gameplay. Oh Jesus. So, the on-foot stuff is so bad it's indefensible, but my theory isn't that it's good, it's that it tried to be the best. And purely on a mechanical level, you can swim and jump, which wasn't always the case in these games, but I think what's most fascinating is that it was designed to be a first-person game. Remember, in 2004, we hadn't hit the Gears of War Uncharted era of third-person shooters, so standards were a bit all over the place, and GTA and True Crime were pretty rudimentary shooters. So rather than trying to make great third-person shooter mechanics, Reflections tried to emulate great first-person mechanics from other games. When creative director Martin Edmondson was asked if they took inspiration from other games, he said this: "We did, well, the only real area that we did with Driv3r is when you get out of the car and you're playing the game in a first-person view, because we were adamant that we wanted a first-person view control style, because other games where you run around cities have been heavily criticized in the area of targeting and shooting. We're not finished with this yet, we still have more tuning to do, but the only way you can truly be free shooting is to have first-person control." This explains why Driv3r controls like a first-person game, or at least a first-person game with the worst controls ever. You can actually switch to first-person while playing in the final game too, but there's no first-person gun models, and it makes the game feel even more clunky. Recently, an early build press release was discovered by Driver fans, and it's fascinating because it forces you to go into first person while you're inside of buildings. So even late in development, first person was still meant to be at the core of Driv3r. The intention to create shooting mechanics that were far more skill-based and free-flowing than other open-world games is there, the execution is not. Alright, let's do one more spin. The mission design. Again, they strived for the stars here. Every mission is designed to be unique, whether you're in a boat or a car, a truck or on a bike, or a shipping container crane or a forklift. There's stealth bits with a silenced pistol, there's on-rail bits shooting out the back of a truck, there's shooting from the passenger seat of cars or the driver's seat of boats. Reflections probably push their limits too far, merely with the amount of novelty vehicles there are, alongside an enormous number of cars. The forklift is fully functional and you need it for one random puzzle. Riding motorbikes is a thrilling balance of high risk, high reward, as they handle entirely different two cars. Chasing Michelle Rodriguez's character on a bike through Istanbul towards the end is a particular highlight. There's even a fully articulated semi-trailer truck where you can attach and detach your load, and you don't use it once in the story mode, it's just there. And this isn't a vehicle, but you can operate the drawbridges. Why not? Where it really gets interesting is the multiple paths you can take in each mission. Take this mission in Nice. The objective is to steal a car from across the city and get it back to base. Simple enough. Now, you can tail this truck all the way there, shoot everyone protecting the car, and do your best to survive driving the car back. Or, you can shoot the driver in the truck on the way over, take it there yourself so everyone thinks that you're the driver, then race away in the car. Or, you can take the truck, push the button on the side of the truck, load the car in, and peacefully drive the truck back while everyone is none the wiser. And all the chaotic possibilities that can happen and paths you can take driving there and back only bring more depth and variety to this mission. It's up to you how you kill the driver of the truck. It's up to you how you escape your pursuers. It might look like a simple mission, but there's so much more to it. Another Nice mission lets you break into a walled-off area in the docks in a variety of ways too. Barge your way through the doors, which you have to hit at speed and shoot out all the guards, or sneak in underneath through the tunnel on the water, or find a back door in, and you can actually stealth your way through if you're careful, silently shooting out guards one by one. It makes you feel clever when you find all these alternate possibilities, and most of the time they're not spelled out to you. They're so easily missable that in an interview from June of this year reflecting on Driv3r, Edmondson shared that most people would just solve each mission and move on to the next one, not knowing about the alternate paths. Also interesting is that early builds of the game indicate that you would have been able to pick different characters for some missions, but that never made it to release. If you want to see more examples of how these missions are designed with multiple paths, look up VortexStory's All Possibilities videos. It's remarkable how many missions have hidden ways of beating them. One mission in Miami has you escaping from these docks while surrounded by on-foot enemies, and cars and vans are flying around corners trying to stop you, and it's super chaotic. You have to think on your feet as you crash cars and shoot everyone you can and steal new cars and do your best to avoid dying while clamoring to get out of there. All these great unscripted moments occur as you repeatedly crash and escape that really make the whole mission. It's where the blend of on-foot and driving mechanics marry well, where they complement each other rather than being separated. This mission makes me think they really could have pulled off the on-foot stuff if more of the game were like this, and if the on-foot stuff were, good, but then it'll flip and become the worst shooter ever again as you repeatedly mow down rooms of bad guys. I could go on about missions I love, like I love the one where you steal cars and load them into a moving truck, and I could keep spinning the wheel because the point stands that Driv3r tried to push the bar in any and every way it could. I could keep connecting the dots from Driv3r to Mann or Ronin or modernism too to paint a picture of Driv3r's place in the world, but I think you get the point. And while stylistic imitation alone, or especially ambition alone, doesn't account for much, Driv3r genuinely and successfully pulled off a lot more than its reputation would suggest. At the end of the day though, the only reason I'm rambling on about Driv3r so much is because I absolutely love it. I love playing it. It's awesome to have what's basically a playable Mann film. It's full commitment to being modernist, or if that term is a bit too over-analytical, then its through line of being contemporary, of pushing boundaries, of being full of conviction, and of being sheerly cool is satisfyingly consistent and bold. And it's just fun to drive these cars, man. Like it's really fun. I just want to drift around every corner in every city in every car. I can't get enough of it. I just don't find it hard to look past its terribleness, and it seems like a lot of people do, which is fine, but I'm not the only one who finds it so compelling and endearing. A small but super passionate community has formed around the game. VortexStory dedicating an entire YouTube channel to this game, a channel that has found thousands of followers, speaks to the fanbase's adoration for Driv3r, and the fact that Vortex can cover the game in so many different ways speaks to how much depth and detail the game truly has, if only it were actually finished. The game's super hard to mod, but that hasn't stopped this community from trying. They're that dedicated. So a few smaller mods have come out, like changing skins and changing textures and making speed hacks and removing the heads-up display and widescreen fixes, sort of that sort of thing. It's amazing to see for what's been a widely maligned game. As I looked for a way to close this video, I booted up the game, clicked on the free ride mode, turned off the cops, and simply took leisure rides around each city, taking it all in. The sunsets, the architecture, the atmosphere. Where other games will wink at the camera or flood you in dopamine hits until you're numb, Driv3r plays it cool. It's confident in its mission. You can describe the game in 100 different ways, broken being one of them, but if I had to pick, I would say Driv3r, if nothing else, is cool. There's also no denying that Driv3r is something of a train wreck. I don't mean to gloss over how unfinished and frustrating it can be, and as much as I'd like to, I can't bring myself to call it completely misunderstood, but it's not hard to appreciate what it achieves, and what it stood for in an industry full of high-budget safe bets. Driv3r was Icarus, and with all its shortcomings, Driv3r is a beautiful disaster. And there we wrap up the video. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for watching. If you did, do all the algorithm stuff. I also want to thank VortexStory and Burrito and Kilo and Evo1998 for helping out so much with the research for this video. You guys are the best, and I'll link all your stuff in the description. I didn't mention the driving games in Driv3r in this video. I just didn't find a spot to bring them up, but it continues the driving games that the first two games had, you know, the mini games you can access from the main menu, so that's the thing. I feel like I needed to mention it. I also need to mention, and probably stress a little more, that Take a Ride was just so much fun back in the day. Like crashing cars and making everything blow up and making cars fly through the sky with that grenade launcher was so much fun. Yeah, this video in general was a bit of a passion project, as I'm sure you can tell. It was a little bit different. You can probably tell the editing style. If you're a fan of mine, the editing style of this one was a bit different. And that was both intentional, but it was partly because I switched to another video editor. So, you know, hopefully that helps with my workflow. I think it will. It's so much faster. I switched from Magix Vegas to Final Cut Pro, and it's just better in every way, I feel. Also, if you're a fan of mine, you might remember I already reviewed Driv3r back in 2015, and I debated not sort of redoing Driv3r or recovering Driv3r because I already did that back then. But I made that when I was a teenager, and it's not that good. And, you know, it's actually a fairly popular video, but yeah, I feel like I didn't do Driv3r justice in that video, and I was still figuring myself out. So here we are again, covering it again, and I hope this video is better. I also covered the GBA video a few years back, which is really interesting. It's a really interesting GBA game, so I'll link that one somewhere too, which you should check out. And yeah, I've been rambling for too long, so thank you for watching. Thank you to all the patrons coming up on the screen, and I'll see you all in the next video. Bye.